If you wanted a little extra tea on the Black Widow of Alabama, Elizabeth Dale Routt, well, honey, you've come to the right place, 'cause I am gonna spill it everywhere. Hello, my silky friends. If you are new to my channel, I'm Lily, and we are spilling the Southern tea today on Elizabeth Dale Routt. Now, I told the full story in my last video, but there were just some things that I didn't put in there for time. So if you are very fascinated by this story like I am, then let's dive in. So I am actually about an hour and a half from Elizabeth Dale's old stomping grounds in Hazel Green. So I decided to take a road trip. And even though I knew the house wasn't there, I kind of just wanted to get a feel of the town. I mean, I've been married a couple of times. I feel like I kind of understand her plight. Just a wee bit. So I thought I would check out the place where she built her fabulous mansion. I have no ex-husband that's dead that I know of.
That I'll know of.
Well, you know some of them.
But do I know all of them?
You do not know all of them. What is she trying to say here? It's right close to where Jimmy Fisk and Joe Quick come together, which was just up here. So I'm going to leave the windows down a little bit and try to get some good film. If I can pull off the road, that would be awesome. I think it's the whole Children of the Corn thing.
Yeah, because like, see, like, look how far back it goes. Like, that's terrifying.
See, I think this right here, I think that pile of trees might be it. Because that looks like all the pictures I've seen before of where the house was. It sat off the road. And so I think that's it. Well, we're in the vicinity. And that's really all I was trying to do. So now more about the story. I wanted to read to you some of the things that Abner Tate put in his pamphlet that was read out in court. Honey, you're talking about some tea. Oh my. And there are court records in the Huntsville, Alabama library. I thought I'd read you some spicy parts. Mr. Tate says of Miss Elizabeth Routt, "Poor soul, she is alone. She ought to have a husband, an industrious, sober husband like D.H. Bingham. She has not been particularly fortunate in that respect heretofore, and in Bingham's opinion was entitled to all the consolation an industrious, sober man can bring to the bed around which nightly assembles a conclave of ghosts to witness the endearments that once were theirs, and shudder through their fleshless forms at the fiendish spirit which wraps the grave worm in the bridal garment, and enforces a lingering death with a conjugal kiss. The worst fate I could wish for Bingham would be the success of his undertaking, but I doubt whether the prize will ever be his. He is dealing with a shrewd, bad woman." Later on, it is quoted, "I say for money, because I cannot believe even him in any amorous passion mingled with his feverish anxiety to get possession of the hand of Elizabeth Routt. He knew her past history. He knew that she offered herself as a reward to him only on the condition that he accomplished a murder. The clasp of her arms around his neck would call up dreadful shapes to sit upon his dreary pillow and make his nights as fearful." Those are some harsh words. I will also say that there is a report of someone who went into Elizabeth Dale's house and said in her foyer as you walked in her door there were 6 hats belonging to each husband there on the wall. Now, I'm not a professional investigator, but it sounds like a serial killer's trophies to me. What do you think? Mr. Tate even waxed a little poetic. Listen to this. As if the dead could feel the icy worm around them still, and shudder as the reptiles creep to revel o'er their rotting sleep. I don't think that was a love poem. So in this pamphlet, he is definitely accusing Elizabeth of being the mastermind behind that little shooting incident in which he almost died. So here's another little tidbit. Abner Tate was actually a friend of Mr. Jeffries before, during, and after his marriage to Elizabeth Dale. So I think he may have known a few things that were going on around the household. And he further writes in this pamphlet, referring to Mr. Jeffries. After the death of Mr. Jeffries, when his children should have been your friends, but instead of that, they were your most inveterate enemies, and even went so far to say you were the cause of his death, which was reported from one end of the county to the other. So you can clearly see how things had escalated by the time Elizabeth felt forced to leave Hazel Green. Now, another interesting tidbit is after the death of Mr. Routt and the whole Bingham fiasco and the attempted murder of Mr. Tate, the church, they weren't too happy with her. She was given the left foot of fellowship. She was kindly asked by the church that she not attend and take her letter elsewhere. Well, now, I tell you, in the South, in those times especially, that was the height of society suicide. Honey, if you ain't welcome at church, you ain't welcome anywhere. I guess even God was done with Elizabeth. So anyway, as I was studying this case, I came across a news clipping that talks about her second husband, Philip Flanagan, who is buried in Maple Hill Cemetery. He actually has a small, unassuming grave at Maple Hill. Now remember, he's the one she married because she thought he had money, because he had all the nice things and clothes, and then found out he was broker than anything you can imagine. He should have seen what was coming. So, a lot of people say that his grave is haunted, and they have seen apparitions of him walking around Maple Hill. Well, I don't really know how they know it's him. I mean, does the ghost just walk up and say, "Hey, I'm Mr. Flanagan"? I don't know. His tombstone had a simple inscription. He was a sincere friend, the agreeable companion, affectionate husband, the honest man. Unfortunately, Elizabeth misspelled his name on his grave. I don't know if that's shady or silky. So in the Huntsville Event magazine, there was published a small little excerpt about him in which they said a medium had visited the site, and this is what she had to say. I guess you can take it with a grain of salt, but I do find it interesting. She was talking to Mr. Flanagan about his death. It was a complete surprise. His body swelled, puffed up, and his limbs became stiff. His body was dug up, and someone examined his fingernails for evidence of arsenic poisoning. In the final moments, he had no strength to walk up the stairs, and he sat back in the kitchen. He called to his wife, but she wouldn't answer. He wanted water, but he couldn't get any. There was food cooking on the stove, but he was getting weaker all the time, and he thinks, "I am too young to die." He did not die suddenly, he says, and he thinks it wasn't something he ate, but rather something he drank. As he was dying, he remembered thinking, "There are no rats in this house." People started coming to gather him up. His wife didn't find him, and he was disappointed that she wasn't there for him, and then he was pronounced dead. But he isn't dead yet. He was just looking down at his own body on the floor. And this is a direct ghostly quote. Go figure. He said, "It isn't what you think it is. The bloodline is most important." Well, you got to have some blood first. Anyway, I thought that was very interesting. Some nice little tidbits and some extras. Also, there is a book that was written called The Black Widow of Alabama. I haven't read it yet. I will get around to reading that, and then if there's enough to say, I'll do a part 3. I hope you enjoyed these little extras and also the little video I took of the actual place where she lived. And I will say this, even my daughter said to me, it had kind of a creepy feel through there. I don't know. It wasn't bad. It wasn't like you were shuddering. But as we started to drive out into the country, and I love country, it did have a little bit of change in vibe. So I don't know. I'm going to read you the last thing that somebody wrote about Elizabeth Dale's land and house. Only one forgotten item about the plantation remains in the memory of the woman who lived there 3/4 of a century ago: the graveyard. A few yards to the south of the house, beneath an immense holly tree surrounded by a low thicket, tombstones lie in a random pile, that of husband, child, and ancestor, a harbor for reptiles and field mice. I don't know if you're resting in peace, Elizabeth, but remember this: stay silky. Oh, remember to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time with some more tea.